So, so what I wanted to look at today is the Shema. We say it every day, and to try and maybe get a little bit of a different understanding or a deeper understanding of what it is. So I just want to before we actually go into the Shema, I want to just show for those who don't see. Can everybody see my screen? Sorry.
Yeah, you can see it. Yeah.
There we go. So on the screen, you can see there's this thing that says Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So that's from a klaf from a mezuzah. It's the same in the tefillin and it's the same in the Torah itself. And what you can see is that the ayin and the dalet of Shema are both large. So ayin and dalet spell aid, and aid means testimony. So therefore, on a very simplistic level, what it's really saying is that Shema Yisrael is the testimony, is the bearing of aidut, of testimony to the oneness, to the uniqueness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's on the one level. But as we're going to go through, we'll see that there are some other aspects of what Shema means that I'd like to discuss and to look at with you, so that we can really understand it. We say it every day. We mean it. We get into it. But perhaps there's something that we can really understand on a different level. So Rashi says we always have to look at Rashi, and Rashi is going to give us a fairly simple understanding of it. And he says Hashem Elok Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael obviously means just hear, listen, Yisrael. That is, by the way, the Netziv. Whenever the Torah refers to us as Yisrael, the Netziv explains that it means that we are behaving in a manner l'mayla min hateva. So it's not a normal way of being. It's not the way the rest of the world behaves. It's the way Am Yisrael behaves. So Shema Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is addressing us. Through Moshe Rabbeinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is addressing us. Shema Yisrael, not just your average person, but look at yourself at a higher level. Look what you can achieve. And when you achieve that, then what? Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we can realize that Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Hashem, our God, Hashem is one, says Rashi. Hashem Shehu Eloheinu Ata V'lo Elohei. What does it mean? Hashem, who is our God now, and not the God of the rest of the world, Hu Atid Liyot Hashem Echad. He will at some point in time be considered to be one, to be the single God. Shneimar, as it says, Ki az ehefoch el amim safa bara likro kulam b'shem Hashem. Because then he says, I will change the nations into a safa bara, to speak in a much clearer manner, likro kulam b'shem Hashem, that everyone will call in the Shem Hashem, as it says, Bayomo Yashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. We say it every day in the Aleinu 3 times after we finish our davening. We say that Bayomahu Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. There will be a point in time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be seen as being Echad by everybody. Right now we see him as Echad, but not everybody does, and that's part of the vision of the Jewish people, is to bring into the world the oneness, the singularity of the Ribono Shel Olam himself. Okay, so that is Rashi, and that gives us a nice framework to work in to understand that Moshe Rabbeinu is still in that visionary space of this is what we're trying to achieve on the long term. The Chizkuni takes a very different approach, and the Chizkuni says that let's first look at this striking space of this big ayin. The first thing we hear is Shema, in the word Shema. And remember, Shema, the word we said is listen. Here, it's something that has to be, that is projected. We should be able to hear this voice calling us from everything that we hear, that we see, that we're engaged with. We must hear it. Shema Yisrael. He says, Yamatzinu ba'agada. We find that in Aggadic works, Ayin shel Shema, that the letter of the Ayin of the Shema is Tluya. Tluya means it hangs. In this case, is that it's hanging because it's so much bigger than everything else. Why is that? Lefi shakadosh baruch hu bara ma'asav ba'ayin ayin. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, when he created it, ba'ayin with ayins. An ayin, what is an ayin? An ayin is the gematria of 70. So therefore, he says that the world is made up of I'm not sure what the mathematical term is, but like of components of 70. So Ketzad. So how does this work? Yisrael, the Jewish people, Echad mi ayin shebu'umos. We one of the 70 nations. V'ha'umos Echad mi'ayim shebahemos. And the nations of the world, in other words, humanity, is 1 in 70 of the behemoths, of the animals. And behemoths, echad mi'ayim shebahemos. And the behemoths are the animals are 1 in 70 of the birds. And the oifos and the birds are 1 in 70 of the dagim, of the fish. And the fish are 1 in 70 of the shadim. The shadim are these like spiritual negative creatures. So there's billions and billions of them because they're 70 times the amount of fish that there are, according to this. And the shadim are echad mishivim sheb malachim. And the shadim are 1 in 70 of the malachim, says the Chizkuni. V'akadosh baruch hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is melech al kulam. He is the king on all of them. V'al zeh yesad ha'payet. V'asharet reishit shmo mu'leh l'mayla mishiva. And that's why when we speak about Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that this is what it's speaking about, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is greater than so much. And his name is greater than the 70s and the 70s and the 70s of the 70s, which is quite a nice thing to understand. I don't know if the maths works on a rational level, but it certainly works on an agadic level. So we have to just bear that in mind. Okay, carries on the Chizkuni, and he says, Shema Yisrael. Shema means Shema v'hevin ledavar zeh. Shema means listen and understand this, says the Chizkuni. Hashem shehaya me'az me'ayin tchila. Hu Hashem shalach shav. Says you have to understand Hashem, who was from the original creation of the world, that who Hashem shalach shav, he is the Hashem of now. V'hu Hashem sheyeh chai v'kayam ba'en sof. And he will also be the Hashem that will live forever and has no ending. And that's be'inyan zehu echad, and in that way he is one. What does that mean? Klomar, yesh bo levado achdut kazeh, ma shelo haya v'lo yeh kein b'shum davar sheba'olam. The achdut, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is that he spans time, this time continuum, and nothing else does. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu started, and he will end, if there ever is an end, he will be the one who continues all the way through, and there's nothing else like that in the world. And that's the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That he, and a part of that, just when I was thinking about this, is part of that is you have a full picture of everything. If you're not part of our world that we live in, is we're stuck in spaces of time. And if we're stuck in spaces of time, so then wherever we are in the present becomes the thing that we have to deal with, and it perhaps brings all the stress. But if we knew of a much bigger picture, so then we wouldn't have all of that concern in such a deep way, perhaps. Obviously, we have to deal with the present. I'm not saying not to, but I'm saying that when you have a much bigger picture, it allows a different perspective, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Said the Chizkuni davar echad. Another way of understanding it is the following: says here, we see here that it says Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That there are 3 times that it mentions Hashem's name in different ways. Why? Because of the nations of the world. Because if we had just said Shema Yisrael, Hashem Echad, because ultimately what we're coming to the point is Hashem is one. So Hayu kol ha'uma v'uma oimrim ala acher patam shel shelanu hu omer shu echad. So then he said, because then the nations of the world, with all their varied and wonderful gods that they have, they would say that the only reason you're saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad is against all of our is against ours. That you've got one and we got all these, we got many. But once you say Hashem Elokeinu, we take ownership of Hashem as our God. Then it's talking about the God of Israel. It's Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. It's our God who is one. But if it only had said Hashem Elokeinu Echad, then Hayu Omrim Shelokei Yisrael Echad Min Ha'olam. Then you would only have said that it's the God of the Jewish people that is one. But everybody else has got their own gods. No. He says that's why it says Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hashem, which is our God. Hashem is one. He's our God, and he's one over everything else that exists, and therefore there's no space, says the Chizkuni, for the nations of the world to in any way want to question that space. There is a Datsa Kainim of the Balei Tosfot. And the Datsa Kainim says that before we say Shema Yisrael, let's understand that the whole of the Shema that we say has got um, um, 345 letters in it. 345 letters. And if it's got 245 letters. Sorry, 245 letters. And it's got 245 letters. What is that? Where does that give us anything? And he says, so therefore, we know that, especially now, we're seeing it now, we're davening without a minyan. When you daven with a minyan, the reason why the chazan at the end says, Hashem Elokeichem Emet, is to add three words to the 245 words of the Shema, which will give you 248, and that corresponds to the traditional understanding that the 248 avarim, limbs in the body. Again, I don't know the maths. Prof. Shub, maybe you can help us out with that, but that's the traditional way of understanding it. But the Torah says, the Vaetchanan says that's why that we v'tzarich lomar el melech ne'eman. We say when we're davening b'yechidus, we're davening on our own, we have to say el melech ne'eman. Kodem shema. Why? Lefi shebashalosh tevot halalu im baruch shem kod malchuto timtza b'kriyat shema ramach tevot. Because that when we say it together with baruch shem kod malchuto lamed, which by the way is also not part of the essential shema, it's an add-on. Therefore, we find it's got 248 letters, and those 248 letters correspond to the 248 Evarim, the limbs. And this is the essence. Whoever says the 248 words, Shebekriyat Shema, Ketiknam, as they are said, and this is where the halachas of Kriyat Shema become important. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Meshamer Ramach Evarav, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will protect his 248 limbs. That's why it says that we must keep the mitzvahs and we must live. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shamoret Sheli, V'ani Eshmoret Shelcha. You guard mine, and I will guard yours. So what is the Vaetchanan telling us? The Vaetchanan is telling us that there's something within the whole utterance of Kriyat Shema that each of those letters corresponds to one of our limbs. And if we say it properly, so then it somehow protects us. Why? Because Hashem says, you guard mine being the Shema, which is the taking on of initially the Ol Malchut Shamayim, the yoke of heaven. Then it's the taking on of all the mitzvot, and then it's the remembrance of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Those seem to be like the absolute essence of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to take with us at all times. If we take that with us in a real way, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will protect us. So how do we take it with us? How do we do it in a proper way, that it's in the way it's supposed to be done? So this is where the halachas come in. The halacha, firstly, there is amongst many, there's a minhag of saying the Shema in the trop. Because when you say it in trop and you lane it properly, so then you actually get all the nuances of the words. But the first thing is just to try and say the words properly. So one of the things that I'd like to just point out, and I'm just going to point out one or two words. Again, I'll share the screen so that you can actually see it. If you look here, you'll see each word in the Torah is written with trop. When the way we lane it, as everybody knows. But if I would say to you, say the Shema Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, say that word, most people will say v'ahavta. But if you look carefully, you'll see that the accent underneath the aleph is that where the munach is. The munach is the trop. V'ahavta. Not v'ahavta, v'ahavta. So sometimes we say words, there's milara, mila'el, where you're supposed to put the emphasis, and each word has got its own special space. And that's what the Vaetchanan is saying, is that we have to be careful on every single word of the Shema. And because we have to be careful, one of the things that's brought down in halacha, where it says, for example, ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavacha. It's not b'chol levavacha, it's b'chol levavacha. You can see that there are two lamas, and the halacha is that one should give a little bit of a pause, b'chol levavacha, between those words. There are other words as well, and that it keeps coming through, where especially we like run one word into the other word, and because we won't run the one word into the other word, then we don't actually say the thing properly. And so what we have to try and do is to actually start saying each word carefully. V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shiftecha v'veitecha uvelechtecha v'aderech uveshochpacha uvkumecha. And each time we say it, for example, Even if we say uchtaftam al mezuzot beitecha uvish arecha. It's not visha arecha. It's not. We don't pronounce the shva there in as a letter uvish arecha. So each time we speak and each time we say the shema, we should try and say it in the most powerful way. I've asked my son in Israel actually to learn it. He's very makpid on words. If he'll send me a recording of the laning of the Shema, and I will send that on the group as well. And on that, we can end. Please, God, we should just have a beautiful day and continue to learn tomorrow. God bless everybody.